Hey there, welcome to Film in the Blank. My name's Ian, I watch a lot of movies. Here's everything I watched in the first half of the month. I started the month off with 1985's Out of Africa, written by Kurt Luedtke and directed by Sidney Pollack. The 80s and I have never really meshed well cinematically. Don't get me wrong, I love a number of 80s movies like they're members of my own family, but they're few and far between for a decade that feels stuffy, bloated, and indulgent. For me, Out of Africa has long been a poster child of these kinds of films, so I was bracing for 2 hours and 41 minutes of inaccessible schlock. While I was pretty bored during most of this, I did enjoy the cinematography of the Kenyan landscape, the janky green screen work, all of Meryl's dumb hats, and the wild accent work.
I'm Baroness Dixon!
This doesn't tick near enough boxes to win Best Picture over fellow nominees like The Color Purple or Witness, but
Priorities, I suppose.
2.5 stars. Up next, with a capital T that rhymes with D that stands for decent, 1962's The Music Man, written by Marion Hargrove and directed by Morton DaCosta. I didn't grow up with this show, and I don't think I've ever seen a theatrical production of it, so I'm not shocked this came across as fairly average to me. Robert Preston is pretty memorable as fast-talking huckster Harold Hill, and little, lisping Ron Howard be still my heart. But the music is all sung a bit too much at me rather than for me, and everything is all too frantic and manic even for a musical. All that said, no moment in a movie has simultaneously enthralled and baffled me this year more than the Widow Peru's strange half-moan, half-fart at the end of a scene. Three stars. Next, a film I thought I'd seen but turns out I hadn't, 2014's Obvious Child, written and directed by Gillian Robespierre. Jenny Slate's natural charm is so potent, I wondered how effectively she could hone it for the more dramatic moments in this, and while not every heavy moment got there for me, she actually found a way to play into her charm to make the darker moments of the story feel all the more tragic. The finished product is a bit more forgettable than I would have thought looking back, but there's enough here to have a good time. But a big shout out to Polly Draper as Jenny Slate's mom, who's been stealing scenes on TV for decades in everything from 30-something to The Good Wife to Hacks. Between this and her heater of a supporting role in 2021's indie firecracker Shiva Baby, she set a high bar for complicated modern movie moms. 3.5 stars. Then a film that Harvey Weinstein managed to convince people was worse than Shakespeare in Love, 1998's Saving Private Ryan, written by Robert Rodat and directed by Steven Spielberg. Wave all the flags you want, this movie is definitive proof that there is nothing more American than chillin' with your boys and listening to some Edith Piaf. Spielberg's list of high-wire cinematic achievements is longer than most other directors' entire filmographies, but this still stands out as the pinnacle of what he's able to do as a filmmaker. His dedication to technical perfection, his eye for shooting seemingly unshootable things, and his unwavering ability to find the reason the audience should care about any of it are all on display beautifully in Saving Private Ryan. Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Jurassic Park are more entertaining, enjoyable rides, but the sheer fact that Spielberg turned a grueling war story that opens with one of the darkest, most violent annihilations of the American spirit into the defining stroke of inspiration and patriotism for World War II is true magic. 5 stars. Up next, Jane Fonda in Space. It's 1968's Barbarella, written by Roger Vadim and Terry Southern, and directed by Roger Vadim. I could ramble about this campy, horny, bonkers film, but I know in my heart that nothing could be half as entertaining as the comments my fiance made while we were watching, so I wrote them down and give them to you now, presented without comment. Three stars. Then 10 cc's of grimy LA, it's MaXXXine, written and directed by Ty West. MaXXXine's got some fun parts, but overall a pretty messy whole. I thought it was Mia Goth's best performance of the trilogy and the best art for one of her characters, but there were too many flies in the ointment for this to succeed beyond a moderately entertaining popcorn thriller. Despite the strong first half, I think this would have been better if Ty West had structured it more around the psychological thriller elements and less around the slasher elements. The kills added to the overall vibe of the film, but I don't think they did much to move the story forward. I also think Kevin Bacon's character was used too much for where his arc ended up, and Giancarlo Esposito's character was used too little for where his arc ended up. If Ty worked that out and took several more swings at cracking that last 15 minutes, MaXXXine really could have been a star. 3 stars. Up next, the most charming film I saw this month, 1953's Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, written by Jacques Tati and Henri Marquet, and directed by Jacques Tati. The film follows Monsieur Hulot, a well-meaning yet clueless klutz played by director Jacques Tati himself, as he attempts to enjoy his beachside vacation. The only other Tati film I'd seen was his debut, 1949's Jour de Fête, which I thought was pretty underwhelming, but the amount of love people have for this film and the character it originated made me more hopeful this would fare better. A lot of the slapstick worked particularly well, and the lack of much dialogue was a smart choice that made the world seem all the more serene and fanciful. That lack of dialogue also gave more attention to other elements like the sound design, which really hit a home run with the recurring bit involving a squeaky dining room door that deserves its own spin-off and first look deal with Warner Brothers. 3.5 stars. Then, just like the white-winged dove, 2016's The Edge of 17, written and directed by Kelly Freeman Craig. Setting aside my bitter, ongoing litigation against Judy Blume for plagiarizing my personal morning mantra,
I must increase my bust.
2023's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret was one of the best crowd-pleasing movies of last year. A lot of that falls to writer-director Kelly Freeman Craig, who first made a name for herself with The Edge of 17, starring Haley Steinfeld, Woody Harrelson, and Kyra Sedgwick playing pretty hard against type. The Edge of 17 falls back into the occasional coming-of-age cliche, but for the most part it's a refreshingly current makeover for the genre, and gives Haley Steinfeld her best role since her Oscar-nominated turn in 2010's True Grit. Even Blake Jenner wasn't half bad, so 4 stars. Up next, a tale as old as time and as French as they could muster, 1946's La Belle et la Bête, written and directed by Jean Cocteau. Even without the big dance number of cutlery tripping on Molly, it's impressive how visually engrossing this 1940s version of the classic French fairy tale still is. The dreamy production design, impeccable costumes, and fantastical prosthetics and visual effects give you that fairy tale feel. I thought the moments where Belle slowly begins to grasp the nature of the beast were stronger and more effectively depicted in this version than the Disney version, and overall the tone felt more in line with the story's mysterious vibe, which, if I'm thinking about it, could be from not having to cut to a candlestick groping a feather duster every few minutes. 3.5 stars. Next, over to Chile with 1982's Missing, written by Costa Gavras and Donald E. Stewart, and directed by Costa Gavras. After the barn burner of a political thriller that was 1969's Oscar-nominated Z, director Costa Gavras is 2 for 2 for me with this twisty, heartbreaking look at the corruption and inhumanity that bubbles up during regime change. Following an American businessman and his daughter-in-law as they desperately search for his son Charlie, who disappeared during the 1973 military overthrow of the Chilean government, Missing reveals some of society's worst impulses and darkest fears, while also making a pretty damning case against America's addiction to overthrowing governments around the world. I loved the way this was shot, particularly the scenes that were pretty hard to watch. I also loved how brilliantly Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek play off each other's very different worldviews and methods of looking for Charlie. The more they find on their search, the more each has to redefine their values and sense of right and wrong, and I can't think of a better way to humanize this very heady topic in the story for a movie-going audience. 4.5 stars. Then I rewatched 2017's Paddington 2, written by Paul King and Simon Farnaby, and directed by Paul King. No debate or world conflict has torn the world apart more than the fight over which Paddington movie is better, and gun to my head, Paddington 1 is better than Paddington 2, but it's a squeaker. Hugh's great, but he's no Nicole, and the original just has more fundamental storytelling for Paddington and his new family, but oh shit, I just remembered Paddington 2 ends with a glitzy prison musical number with pastel umbrellas and Hugh tap dancing, so crap, just shoot me. 4.5 stars. From one London bear to another, it's Bob Hoskins in 1980's The Long Good Friday, written by Barry Keefe and directed by John Mackenzie. I snagged Criterion's new 4K of this and really enjoyed it. The film follows Harold Shand, a volatile crime boss on the verge of transforming his illegitimate dealings into a legitimate business empire as he struggles to make sense of a series of attacks on his people and infrastructure that threatens to derail everything. Bob Hoskins lets himself fully off the leash, chewing up scenery, other actors, and his own sanity. Hot on his heels is a devilishly enamoring Helen Mirren who matches Bob Hoskins' energy with her own simmering intensity. Other real standouts are the terrific freewheeling synth score that seems intent on showcasing every single instrument in the orchestra, that wildly effective ending, and Pierce Brosnan in his film debut as a shower time assassin. Pretty messed up, Pierce. 4 stars. Then, lesbians? In this economy, it's 1961's The Children's Hour, written by John Michael Hayes and directed by William Wyler. It's always dicey to turn to a pre-civil rights era film for anything social issues related, but watching Basil Dearden's 1961 psychological thriller Victim earlier this year inspired some hope. So I checked out this film from William Wyler, who's an incredibly solid director behind some of my favorite films, like 1939's Wuthering Heights, 1946's The Best Years of Our Lives, and 1953's Roman Holiday. The Children's Hour stars Audrey Hepburn and Shirley MacLaine as two former classmates running a private girls' boarding school amidst the drumbeat of rumors that their relationship may not be strictly platonic. If you can get past one of the most grating child performances I've ever seen, Audrey and Shirley are both so good. They've got great chemistry, great balance between them, neither trying to steal the spotlight from the other. What a pair. Obviously, I wish the film could have tackled the themes more explicitly and let Audrey and Shirley continue down their characters' paths more completely, but this still found some great areas to mine and left a pretty good impression. 4 stars. Next, a potent 2024 Oscar contender, Sing Sing, written by Greg Quaidar and Clint Bentley and directed by Greg Quaidar. Inspired by the real-life rehabilitation through the arts program at Sing Sing Prison, the film highlights the seemingly insurmountable task of rediscovering and valuing your humanity while living in an environment that seems specifically designed to strip your humanity away from you. Most of the cast is composed of actual graduates from the program playing versions of themselves, which is a solid, authentic touch. Still, Sing Sing is anchored by the viscerally human Coleman Domingo, who's been steadily building his industry cred over the last decade better than any, with memorable roles in films like Selma, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, The Color Purple, Zola, and the Oscar-nominated Rustin. It'll squeeze a few tears out of you, inspire you to find empathy for those you may not think deserve it, and make you wonder how anyone could leave prison with a shred of hope still left in their heart. I'm not sure this has the steam to go all the way at the Oscars in terms of winning Best Picture, Actor, or Supporting Actor for breakout Clarence Macklin, but it'll no doubt pick up some noms come next year. 4 stars. Then Hide Your Kids. No, literally hide your kids. It's Longlegs, written and directed by Oz Perkins. Some smart marketing and rave early reviews shot this to the top of my most anticipated, and I was pretty satisfied for the most part. The third act is well below the quality of the enamoring first and second acts, but the film had built up so much intrigue and unsettling vibes by that point, I was still able to look back and have enjoyed the whole ride. The film follows Micah Monroe as Lee, a reclusive FBI agent assigned to track down a mysterious serial killer known only as Longlegs. There are a few early surprises that add some unexpected zest to that fairly straightforward premise, but going in as blind as possible is still the way to go. The filmmaking pulls a lot of inspiration from films like Zodiac, Cure, Hereditary, The Silence of the Lambs, and Psycho, the last of which starred director Osgood Perkins' father, Anthony Perkins, in his defining role. Yet even with all those notorious influences, Longlegs still finds its own long sea legs with a dirtsy, flirtsy look all its own and one of the most horror-filled worlds of a horror film I can recall. The movie creeps under your skin from that jarring first scene and fills you with a seemingly endless sense of dread that you'll still be shaking off after the credits roll. 3.5 stars. Next, my Western for the month, 1950's The Gunfighter, written by William Bowers and William Sellers, and directed by Henry King. Gregory Peck headlines this deconstructed Western that's less focused on retreading the action-packed tropes of the genre and more interested in examining how inescapable the world of a Western is for its characters. Characters may be done with playing their cyclical roles, but the Western genre will always be there, tapping them on the shoulder, reminding them that it's not done with them. At its strongest, The Gunfighter borrows the rushed timing of High Noon and the brooding inevitability of Shane to show how our reputations can take just as much, if not more, than they provide. I could have used some more plate spinning to keep the stakes heightened in the second act, and maybe a bit more change of scenery outside of the main saloon, but I'll gladly take a Western that feels somewhat modern in its approach and sensibilities over something more stodgy and backward thinking. 3.5 stars. Then over to Africa for 1972's Sambizanga, written by Maurice Pons and Mario de Andrade, and directed by Sarah Maldoror. Even with all the movies I've seen in my life, there are still a number of countries in the world I've never seen a film from. So I checked out this Martin Scorsese recommended film from Angola about a family torn apart by the Portuguese secret police and the repercussions those actions have for the family and the country's building liberation movement more broadly. Director Sarah Maldoror's style of filmmaking is very reserved and calm, even when the events on screen are anything but. I thought her style worked well in the more intimate and introspective moments, but when it comes to the meatier narrative parts of the film, I don't think her style helped much. With the film's minimal plot and stoic characters, I really wanted Maldoror to let us into the emotional core of the story more, especially when Maldoror had been an assistant to Gillo Pontecorvo on 1966's incredibly emotional The Battle of Algiers, which, side note, is phenomenal, and I don't throw that word around lightly. Both tackle prominent liberation movements against European colonizers in African countries, but Sambizanga never manages to recruit you into its movement body and soul like the Battle of Algiers manages to do. 3 stars. And last, but also certainly least, Fly Me to the Moon, written by Rose Gilroy and directed by Greg Berlanti. When I saw the first look at this, I got concerned. When I saw the trailer for this, I got worried. And when my mom saw this and gave it an A+, I got downright terrified. It felt like someone spent $100 million to turn a space-themed porno from the 90s into a 2 hours and 12 minutes long feature film, and then replaced all the sex scenes with mindless chit-chatting. The core concept of the film is strong, but it needed a different director that didn't shoot it like a rom-com, a different leading man who has more than one facial expression, and most of all, a different screenplay that doesn't feel like the lamest TV movie script from 40 years ago. Clearly, moms will love this, but I thoroughly hated this. Really shitty wig work too. 1.5 stars. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on these movies? Any others I should check out? What beloved childhood author are you suing for all they're worth? Also stay tuned for other great commentary videos, reviews, video essays, and more. You can check me out on Letterboxd at Cineramadome24 or on TikTok at Film in the Blank. I appreciate you liking and subscribing. See you next time.